Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Radical Candor podcast. I'm Kim Scott, co-founder of Radical Candor and Just Work.
And I'm Jason Rosoff, CEO and co-founder of Radical Candor.
And I'm Amy Sandler, your host for the Radical Candor podcast. Today we're talking about the second step on the GSD wheel, which is clarify. We're shifting now. We've clarified our own thinking, and you now understand the idea. Kim, how do you present this fledgling idea in a way that it's also easily understandable to other people?
So I think too often we assume that other people, what is obvious to us is also obvious to other people. And so one of the things that you can do for someone else in a one-on-one meeting where you're trying to clarify the idea, it's clear in their mind, you can help them understand why it may not be clear in someone else's mind. And sort of remind the person that there's this whole set of things that you know that the other person doesn't know. And there's this whole set of things that seem important to you, but that may not be at all important to that other person's understanding, and helping them to strip their idea down to its most basic level for the other person, but not too basic, is really a gift.
Yeah, in my obnoxious aggression story, I talk about seeing a person use a piece of pretty dangerous machinery incorrectly. And when I was thinking about that story, I remember discarding a piece of data, which was I was having this reaction watching this person do this, like they're taking a shortcut. They're like doing this on purpose because they're trying to. I was like, there's like a thing in my head, and what I came to find out was basically they were just not sure what to do. And all I had to do was like take the time to show them like how to do it correctly. But the judgment that appeared in my mind when I thought, oh, this person is like doing this on purpose, they're sort of taking a shortcut, caused me to approach them with annoyance and anger as opposed to curiosity and openness. And I think this is a thing that happens all the time with ideas, because someone asks a question and it's about your idea, for example. So you try to present it, someone asks a question, you're like, oh, this is a manipulatively insincere or passive aggressive question. This person clearly understands. They wouldn't ask such a basic question if they weren't trying to trip me up. When in fact, they might actually just be saying, I'm like very confused about this thing. I don't actually understand the basic part of some basic part of your idea. I feel like, Kim, that just it's so important that we be open to the possibility that we have not yet nailed how to refine or simplify the idea for somebody else, especially when ideas are new.
Yeah, and then we don't give in to the fundamental attribution error. Like, the reason you don't understand this is that you're stupid, or, everyone knows. Anytime you're saying everyone knows, or, any kind of these blanket statements, you're often giving in to your fundamental attribution error.
Yep, Jillian and I have this conversation all the time.
Which is
she's always telling me everyone knows. Yeah. She's always like, everyone must know this. And I'm like, no, like you're a very well-read, informed person. Not everybody knows how like the healthcare industry works inside and out, for example.
Yeah. Nobody wants to know. That's what I have to say.
The sad truth.
Also not true.
It's interesting as you're both talking, when we especially think about this with email and group emails and how quick people are to be like, why did they write this and how could they not know this? And so I know we talk a lot about the value of having synchronous conversations, but can we do another entreaty on why email as a group communicator can be the progenitor of this sort of why are they asking this stupid question? It just feels like it's so often when you'll see these email exchanges, and it would have just been so much easier if someone picked up the phone or had a quick video call.
This is when the picking up the phone feels slower, but is actually faster. Not only are you more open, you're also more efficient when you do that. And I think all you need to do is just go onto Twitter for a little while, and you'll see what you'll notice. You'll notice, not see. You'll notice this problem.
All the guidance that we've given so far is to have these conversations, to refine ideas synchronously with other people, to like not allow this to be like a completely asynchronous adventure. And I think the exception being, Kim says, writing your crappy first draft in private, like for yourself, it's fine if it's not like you're not synchronously sharing with somebody else. But like when you actually get the feedback, one thing I never understood how you did this, Kim, of just like, I never tried to write anything as complicated as an actual book or a novel. And when I did try to write documents that described strategy, for example, I would become so frustrated by the ping pong comments that would happen on the side of that document where someone is like, because it's even though it's like rich in context that they're like highlighted a specific thing in the document and they've written something, I still felt like I was missing context for like, why was this the important thing? And I would get to a point where I was just like, we need to talk synchronously. I cannot review these comments and pretend that I understand what's going through your mind. So it's not just email. I think anytime you're having somewhat contextless conversations, especially about new ideas, like it reaches a point of diminishing returns so fast.
Yes. And I did find in the document, actually, it's what I call document-centric chat. Is for me as a writer really, really helpful because different people will highlight the same passage and say 16 different things about it. And for me, that's helpful because I'm now out of my get into my head. Now I'm trying to get out, and noticing what different people say about the same passage is very helpful for me to understand all the many ways it could be misinterpreted or misunderstood, even if I don't agree. Or sometimes people will edit, make an edit that I totally disagree with, but that is still very, very helpful because it makes me understand, they didn't understand what I was trying to say at all. And that's really good to know.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, because I think part of the problem was in some ways that I think I was mixing my modes there again. Like I was in like, let's get over this and make a decision mode. Like I want to get to agreement, and that's a bad way to use document-centric chat. You want It still needs to be at the state where you are learning from one another and building on that idea. That makes perfect sense now that you say it that way.
See, we clarified.
Yeah, I love this. And I will say as one of the people in the comments and doing some lengthy comments, I'm glad that A, they were helpful, and B, I also enjoyed as an editor or writer. I mean, I guess since you're the editor, I was contributing, but seeing what other people's
you were the
reactions.
Editor. You were the boss. I was the writer.
But there were a lot of other bosses, but also seeing what they were taking out of it too. Like I got a lot out of that process as well.
Can I add one more thing about this?
Please.
So here's an interesting thing. With Radical Candor, there were, I think, 115 different collaborators on the document, and only one of them wanted to comment privately. And because that person's boss was also in the document, and that's why. And so that was funny. But with Just Work, which was a harder book to write and a harder book to read, I think a lot of people were not comfortable with the document-centric chat, and they wanted to respond privately. And they often responded. When I saw their comments, I could understand why they wanted to respond privately. It was very interesting.
All right. So, Kim, in the book, you describe how staff meetings are actually hard to run, but a really important way to review how things have gone the previous week, to share important updates, and also to clarify the most important decisions and debates for the coming week. So staff meetings are filling a few of your different get shit done goals around listening and learning and clarifying. But since we're focusing today on clarify, how does an effective staff meeting agenda fit into that process?
Here's the problem with staff meetings, in my experience, is that if you're not really careful about how you manage it, everyone who is in your staff meeting will be annoyed because it's taking too long and wasting their time. And everyone who is not in your staff meeting will feel sad and bad and left out. So that's the problem with staff meetings. So the thing that I like to do is to divide the staff meeting into 3 different sections. The first section is a review of the key metrics, and that's where you're sort of learning. The second section is a study hall, in which everybody writes down what are the 4 snippets, what are the 4 things you did last week, and what are the 4 things you plan to do this week. Then to identify side conversations that need to happen, but not to have the side conversations in the meeting in front of everyone else. That's what just those updates, going around and doing the updates will take an hour unless you give people 15 minutes and you tell them to write it down and read everybody else's. And if you want to talk to them after the meeting. And then the third thing that is really you're clarifying what are the 3 most important decisions that you're going to make and what are the 3 most important debates that you're going to make this week. But do not debate or decide in the staff meeting. You want to have separate meetings in which the relevant people in the organization can come, and we'll talk more about that. But you want to push decisions and debates into the facts. You don't want to have that in your staff meeting because people who are close to the facts are probably not in your staff meeting if you're leading a big team. That's kind of where it fits in, and it's really providing the whole organization, not just your team, but the whole organization with that clarification about your debate process. How are you gonna debate new ideas, and then your decision making process, and who, what, and when. Who's going to make what decisions by when is one of the most important clarifying roles that you play as a leader.
Yeah, I was imagining the 20,000 people who'll download this episode on that first day nodding along to the people in your meeting will think it's too long and everyone else will be sad that they're not there. Yeah. I feel like every single person who has worked at a company where there's a staff meeting has that exact same reaction. I love the separating those things out and giving explicit airtime to them. Again, this is a place where time boxing things is your friend. It creates It creates urgency, which is a necessity because the things that your team are doing are complicated and it could take up infinite time. You could have infinite time spent in a staff meeting. So I love that.
It sounds so simple what I just described, but whenever I roll this out with individual leaders, it's much harder than it sounds. I want to just give you a warning.
Yep, of course, because there's always something that comes up in the moment where you're like, well, now what do I do? This doesn't fit neatly into any of these 3 boxes, but it seems really important that we talk about it. In my mind, again, this is a place where I think I've said this before on the podcast, but if I haven't, there's this sense in the world, especially among people who agree with us, where it's like, you can't be command and control, you can't be top down. There's a sense that structure is oppression. If we structure things, we're oppressing people's ability to freely communicate, and that's not true. The lack of structure does not lead to democracy. Democracy requires the actual soliciting of input of the people on your team whose perspectives matter. It requires structure. So the opposite of structure is not freedom; it is chaos.
Yes, yeah, it's sort of like poetry. There's some rules that are associated with, at least with some poetry, it's at least for some poets.
Yeah.
So speaking of time boxing, Jason, I do want to get your perspective on what Kim calls think time.
Yes,
you time box. Think your own thing.
I am not. I feel like I am in no position to answer this question because I have been terrible about doing this for the last several months in particular. So I'll have.
But actually, I think you're in a great position because I suspect a lot of people, those people nodding along with the staff meeting, are nodding along right there with you. I haven't been able to do think time because I'm putting out so many fires and I'm so much in the business and the operation. So, what advice would you give yourself to serve as a proxy for the folks who are struggling with that as well?
Yes. So I find that I can't schedule think time when I am going to be in front of my computer. Let's not say my computer, the place where I do work. If I'm going to be in the place where I do regular work, that is not a good time for think time. I need to make sure that if I'm scheduling think time, I can be in another place. Because otherwise what will happen is the thing will beep and I'll look up into the corner and something will be on fire. And then I'll be using my think time to solve the thing that is on fire. So I need to create a separate space and time for those things. And one of the best ways that I found to do that is just take a walk around, like go walk outside. Like, you can call me if something's literally on fire. I am reachable, but I am not in front of the machine that is going to distract me and stop me from actually having think time. So that's probably like the thing that I've done that has been most helpful for me in making think time really happen is just schedule as a walk on my calendar.
And for me, when I write in a browser that doesn't have Twitter. where my password is not. It's just that little. That's what's necessary.
I mean, what I'm hearing is there's an element of self-awareness and knowing our sort of triggers and distractions. So there's an element of do what you need to do to protect that time and nurture yourself. And also, Jason, there's so many other benefits of going for a walk and being outside beyond just the distractibility. So I think those are fantastic tips. Well, speaking of tips, it's time for our Radical Candor checklist. And these are tips you can use to start putting Radical Candor into practice. Tip number 1, avoid the fundamental attribution error by focusing on specifics, not attributes. Instead of saying or thinking, what an idiot, be very clear about what went wrong or right. For both praise and criticism, use the CORE model. You'll find the link in the show notes. CORE stands for context, observation, result, and next steps. Focus on helping the person fix the problem by providing specific things they can act on rather than criticizing personality traits that they can't alter. Kim, over to you for tip number 2.
Have a staff meeting and structure it very rigorously. About 15 minutes to cover key metrics, 10, 15 minutes to cover snippets of what people did last week and next week, and 15, maybe 20 minutes to decide what are the 3 biggest decisions that the team needs to make that week and what are the 3 biggest debates that ought to be had and who, what, and by when. Time boxing is your friend.
Tip number 3. You can schedule think time away from your desk. Think time is a mix of focused thinking and mind wandering that allows for the kind of problem solving, creativity, and innovative mindset that you need to tackle those really difficult problems. Try taking a walk and removing distractions. For more tips, you can go to radicalcandor.com/resources. Go ahead and download our learning guides for practicing Radical Candor. If you want to see the show notes for this episode, go to radicalcandor.com/podcast.
If you like what you hear, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. If you don't like it, please send us an email. Praise in public, criticize in private.
Love it, Kim. And if you want to send us an email, go ahead, podcast@radicalcandor.com. Kim, we've spent a lot of time talking about editing and writing and clarifying in your own head. Tell us about your latest book.
My latest book is Just Work: How to Root Out Bias, Prejudice, and Bullying to Create a Kick-Ass Culture of Inclusivity. Available everywhere books are sold.
And if you're looking for some Radical Candor swag, the Radical Candor store is now open. By the way, did we get the gavel? Not yet. Okay, sorry. Okay.
Gavel is coming.
The gavel is coming. You heard it here first. Go to radicalcandor.com, click the shop link, and get your Radical Candor swag. Thanks for joining us. Our podcast features Radical Candor co-founders Kim Scott and Jason Rosoff, is produced by our Director of Content, Brandy Neal, and hosted by me, Amy Sandler. Music is by Cliff Goldmacher. Go ahead and follow us on Twitter @Candor and find us online at radicalcandor.com.